Today is Sunday, June 18th, 2017. This is Celtics Beat on the CLNS Media Network, and I am Larry H. Russell. The 2017 NBA offseason officially gets rolling this Thursday evening down in New York with the draft. That leads right into free agency. So it is time. Our off-season extravaganza, free agency, trade market, and draft preview all in one. Who will the Celtics sign? Who's the best fit? Can they compete with Cleveland next year? And are they really going to trade that number one overall selection? Host of the Game Theory podcast, Sam Vecenie, coming up on episode number 214 of Celtics Beat, being presented by ZipRecruiter and HelloFresh. Gordon Hayward or Blake Griffin?
I would take Gordon Hayward. I think he's a little bit more of a sure thing given Blake Griffin's injury history, given some of the concerns about Blake Griffin's fit with Al Horford defensively and in terms of the way that he would work within the front court. His rebounding over the last few years has really dropped off. That's obviously the Celtics' number one need right now in terms of shoring up what is basically their biggest weakness, in my opinion. So I would take Hayward. I know he wouldn't necessarily help the rebounding, but I do think that at this stage of the game, he is just a more consistent, more capable player than Blake Griffin, given the way the game has moved out to the perimeter.
I'm just so resigned to the Celtics actually signing Gordon Hayward. I know there was an ESPN report that came out earlier in the week that, oh no, Miami's going to be in the mix. But I felt that Gordon Hayward is going to be, I'm blowing all over the place. I've been feeling pretty confident about Gordon Hayward being in Boston for the last calendar year, and I would say the odds are, quote unquote, in the words of Johnny Miller, better than most in that he will be. But I can't even make an argument for Blake Griffin to join the Celtics, largely because I haven't even thought of it, only because I've just been so emotionally invested in Gordon Hayward. So, Sam, you are an LA guy, and we are here with Sam Vecenie, one of the most foreknown and the most accurate prognosticator of collegiate and amateur basketball products. We will talk about that very shortly. Sam Vecenie of the Sporting News and host of the Game Theory podcast on CLNS. So real quick to kind of wrap this portion up, though. You are out in L.A., Sam. You've seen enough of Blake Griffin. Could you give me a Blake Griffin argument for the Celtics, then, to make this thing far easier for me?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Blake Griffin, when he's healthy, is one of the 15 best players in the NBA. He is not just a dunker anymore, quote unquote. Like, who knows with how much the injuries are going to kind of sap his athleticism going forward into his older years. But, this is a guy who really added to his game, right? He's become one of the best passing big men in the NBA. He can now knock down shots out to 18 to 20 feet. The inside game still exists. Defensively, he's at least a little bit switchable. He's not going to be a rim protector. He's not going to be a high-level defender, but he at least has some use defensively. I am cautiously optimistic that I think a Blake Griffin tenure, as long as he stays healthy, would end well in Boston. But if the choice is between Gordon Hayward and Blake Griffin, which it ostensibly is, I mean, if they would both say Boston should, or if they would both tell Boston, hey, I'm willing to sign there, I would take Gordon Hayward and not even really think twice.
I'm curious to see how Blake Griffin would fit, whereas I'm not curious to see how Gordon Hayward fit. It's going to be exactly like Al Horford last year in that he would fit in absolutely seamlessly. There's going to be no issues in having to remake the team or the offense with Gordon Hayward once you insert him into the Celtics lineup. You actually kind of sent a little dinger to my head a little earlier in this interview, Sam, when you mentioned the rebounding deficiency that the Celtics have, that everyone who follows the Celtics to any type of what degree or another is aware of. Do you think that's their biggest need or their biggest deficiency when they actually try to attack this off season?
So I think it's certainly their biggest deficiency, right? But in terms of need, I'm not actually entirely sure how much of a need it is, because they have a guy coming over, an Ante Zizic, who is a really, really good rebounder, right? He is going to be on a rookie scale deal. I believe they took him number 23 last year in the NBA draft. Has continued to really mature and develop over there. I had him as a lottery pick last year in my draft rankings, number 14, number 13 overall, something in that range. And he's done nothing to make me think that he is not going to be a really good player. I think he can be a potential starting NBA center, especially in a defense that will surround him with a lot of length and athleticism, with guys like Gordon Hayward, who's a plus defender if he ends up there, with guys like Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart. They're the kind of weapons that you need to kind of insulate Ante Zizic because he is not necessarily like super slow-footed, but he's also not going to be a switchable defender in the same way that Al Horford is. So I think that he's going to be a really, really nice piece for them going forward that addresses the biggest problem with the Celtics right now.
You put out a tweet, I think it was you, I can't quite recall, so please correct me if I am wrong, that you had him as like a top, you said lottery pick this year. Where did you have him? Did you put out a tweet that he may even be top 10 this year? Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I had him as a lottery pick last year. If he was in this draft, I would say he would probably go like number 11 or so. Wow. Like right in that range. So, he ends up moving from, where was he? He was either with Red Star or
Turkish League.
Last year.
I apologize.
Last year, I'm trying to remember. He was either with Red Star or another team within that city, within Belgrade last year. And I can't remember the exact team, but he has now moved to Turkey and was basically the same player, right? Like he was equally as dominant, moving up to a much higher level of competition in the Turkish league this year and in the Euro League this year. So that bodes really well for his translation. He is going to be a guy who can go out and get you rebounds. He is going to be able to provide energy, provide motor, provide that boost off the bench that I think the Celtics could really use.
Does that change really any strategy in attacking the rest of the offseason? We all know they're going to be all in on Gordon Hayward. July 1st, I believe the day is. It always seems to be every single year, 12/01. There's going to be some sort of, ambassadorship being headed his way. But how do you think that changes Boston's strategy with especially, I know the organization is very high on Zizic. Sometimes you can you can believe only so much from an organization. But, I mean, just the people around basketball that we have the highest opinions of their opinion of basketball, such as yourself, Sam. How do you think that changes the Celtics in terms of, as I just now asked for the second time, and how they attack the rest of their offseason with filling out their roster?
Look, I don't really know that it does, to be honest. I think that if they could get another veteran big man, even with Zizic coming over, I do think that they would probably bounce on that idea, right? Like they would go for it and decide this is a smart move. Having said that, I don't really think that I don't think it's going to make too big of a difference. I think they're going to be happy with Zizic. I think they're going to be happy with if a veteran big man is willing to go there. I think they'll be good with that, and they'll probably bounce on it too. But at the same time, this is a team that's just trying to get better. They're trying to build the right way. They're trying to build through somewhat youth while still, setting them up not only for this window, but for the window after LeBron James leaves Cleveland. So it's a bit of a complicated situation, but ultimately I do believe that the Celtics will handle it really well because that front office is really, really good.
Yeah, a conundrum is the word I believe I threw at you before we got on the air. With the way the whole new salary structure now after the new television deal, it's really hard for even all of us to gauge what potential free agents are going to be getting. There may be a player X or a player Y that we as outside observers may view that could be obtained on the cheap. I mean, I threw some names down like Dwayne Dedman and Zaza Pachulia. Well, he's really aged, but I mean, are those roughly? I mean, are those just names that I'm just throwing out? Are those players that could be obtained for just a handful of $1 million? Because the Celtics likely, if they do sign Gordon Hayward or another max free agent, won't be having they won't have much left over to sign anyone of significance. Are those obtainable players if the best case scenario happens for them, which I expected to do?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is that around the NBA, there is, I don't want to say an expectation that Gordon Hayward's going to be a Boston Celtic because you never know until the money's on the table. But it does seem like people around the league do think that Gordon Hayward, is going to be in Boston. We're
operating under that assumption here. The 10 minutes under the show, I hope the audience now has finally come to that conclusion.
Right. and again, like, I'm not like reporting anything that like is breaking news that like there are major connections between Gordon Hayward and the Boston Celtics, and like there are going to be those connections going forward. Like, Gordon Hayward is a really, really good basketball player, and Boston is obviously going to have interest. There's obviously interest in at least hearing a pitch on the Hayward side of things. So we're going to see how it goes. And ultimately, if Hayward signs with Boston, we'll just have to see. I'd imagine it would be like a 3+1 contract at the max level, so that he can opt out after 3 years again, and maybe explore his options, but mostly get to that 10-year max contract window that allows you to get 35% of the cap. So going back to I'm sorry, I even forget the question after the Gordon Hayward tangent.
Exactly. Operating under the assumption that that does happen, what are some possible veteran names, particularly along the front line? Could the Celtics... You brought up Dwayne Dedmon. I like that idea a lot, actually. He's a guy that I think will probably end up around the new mid-level exception, which is right around like $8 million. He makes a lot of sense for them. The Spurs were 5 points better defensively with Dwayne Dedmon on the floor than when he was off the floor this year. They were obviously the best defense in the NBA this year, so that says a lot. Good rebounder. Really, really good rim protector. He would fit a limited role for Boston in a really nice way. Pachulia, we'll see. I would imagine that, Golden State will try and do what it can to keep him. I'm not sure they're going to be able to. I like the Dedmon fit a little bit better just in terms of rim protection and rebounding, but, Pachulia would work as well. Is Kyle O'Quinn, is he a free agent? I mean, I don't remember seeing his name anywhere, so I assume that's a no.
He is not. Okay. No, I believe he has 2 more years on his deal.
Okay. And are there really any probably big man names? I mean, Andrew Bogut, he doesn't have much left, right? I mean, now I'm just really slinging some mud against the wall.
Yeah, I mean, Bogut's probably going to be like a minimum guy this year. I think that is, intriguing as a last-ditch resort if you're Boston. Off the top of my head, I don't really have any names, but I do think that, a veteran big man isn't necessarily the worst idea.
Yeah, veteran big if, once again, just really don't know where the Celts cap is going to be, as they're scrambling as is to shed every penny. More on that certainly later. We're not there yet, Sam. But if there is an opportunity out there that allows it, certainly that makes sense. Now, once again, going to talk about this later in our draft preview portion of the interview, especially with the latest buzz with Boston possibly moving down and thus accumulating more picks, which, one could make a safe assumption would be to make another move. But let's go. You know me. I'm a stay in the present moment guy, man. Let's go with what we have on this very Sunday morning. Father's Day, by the way. I just realized that. In this present moment, where do you feel Boston stands on the trade market this summer? And I guess that is sort of an open-ender of feel free to talk about Jimmy Butler and or Paul George.
What I will say is that if the Celtics, for whatever reason, would miss out on Gordon Hayward, I would, if I was them, continue to just build toward the post-LeBron James era in Cleveland. If they do get Gordon Hayward, though, I think it's worth pushing in. And if they get Gordon Hayward on his max, they still do have the capability of going out and fitting a Jimmy Butler in a trade, right? Like, they can go out and get both Jimmy Butler and Gordon Hayward this summer, and that's intriguing to me because then you would have a situation where you have Isaiah Thomas, you have those 2 monster top 20 player in the NBA wings, you have Al Horford, you have Markelle Fultz, you have a team that can really compete, I think, at the highest level, even with the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference, and then you'd be set into perpetuity. Now, in my opinion, I do not think it would take the 2017 number 1 overall pick to go out and get a Jimmy Butler, and the reason that I say that is that, the best asset in any of these deals that the Chicago Bulls are going to get is still that 2018 Brooklyn Nets pick, right? Like, no other team is going to be able to top that asset in terms of long-term value, in my opinion, in a Jimmy Butler trade at the very least. You can throw in a Jay Crowder who's on a bargain basement contract. You can throw in, a Terry Rozier who's an interesting point guard for a team that clearly could continue to need some point guards going forward, given that Cameron Payne couldn't get off the bench in that playoff series, and Rajon Rondo's older, and Michael Carter-Williams is a free agent, and Jaren Grant is still Jaren Grant. So, like, I like the idea of moves like that. Maybe you have to throw in, another piece there
Marcus
of the puzzle.
Smart.
But
is that too much?
Marcus, it probably is in a vacuum.
Wow.
But at the same time, can you overpay for Jimmy Butler whenever you're trying to compete for a championship? You know what I mean? Whenever you still have the ability to just go over the cap to re-sign Avery Bradley next summer. So I'm not saying that like Marcus Smart and Avery Bradley are redundant, but whenever you're talking about getting Jimmy Butler, you kind of do what you have to do, right? Like, I don't know that Marcus Smart or Terry Rozier or like Jaylen Brown or something like that is going to be like the deal breaker on that kind of move, you know?
All right, screw it. Let's have a little fun with this. It's with you, Sam. This is our off-season preview show. I'm always talking about staying in the present moment on this show. Very rarely do I get involved in the fantasies and the possibilities on this show. I've dragged the off-season and it is a thing as long as I possibly could. This is the first show that I'm dedicating it to since the Celtics got eliminated in the playoffs, really since the trade deadline last year. It's all been about that particular week. But let's go with a hot take. Does that team beat Cleveland next year?
Oh, man. I mean, it would all depend on what Cleveland did. Like, if Cleveland would go out and, end up with a Paul George on their team, or if Cleveland would, make moves to shore up their bench or do something like that, I think that it would be a hell of a series, man. Like, it would be a knockdown 7-game, drag-them-out series with multiple guys who can cause LeBron James at least relative issues, guys who can really score and who can shoot the basketball. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I think they would win, but I think they would be in with a very real 50-50 shot against that Cleveland team that still has the best player in the world in LeBron James.
Too political of an answer. Then how about, I got to get you give me a pro-Celtics argument, then, that they would be the best team in the Eastern Conference Final. In the Eastern Conference, if all these dominoes can fall their way in the next month and a half or so.
Well, I mean, they would have a significant coaching advantage in Brad Stevens against Tyronn Lue. I think that a point guard combination of Markelle Fultz and Isaiah Thomas would exceed Kyrie Irving. I think that a wing combination of Gordon Hayward and Jimmy Butler is, like I said, 2 top 20 players in the NBA. That is outrageous, and that is those two guys would fit really well together, in my opinion. They just run side pick and rolls all day and, stretch the floor for each other, and they're both really solid defenders. Al Horford would, I think, exceed anyone on Cleveland's roster at that stage. The X factor here is obviously what would the Celtics have to give up for Jimmy Butler after a Gordon Hayward signing, and what would the Cavs do in in response to the Celtics gearing up and the Warriors being an all dominant force. I don't know what that X factor would be. I don't necessarily know how exactly that whole thing would go down. Having said that, though, I think the Celtics would very clearly be in with a fighting chance.
This is episode number 214 of Celtics Beat, which today is being brought to you by HelloFresh. Go to HelloFresh.com and use code BEAT30. That is BEAT30. Meal kit delivery service focusing on the whole experience, not just the final plate. Get delicious, ready-to-make meals for less than $10 per meal and save some dough while at it, and support the show with the code BEAT30. One real quick question on this, Sam. Is it worth it being the 2A or 2B team in the NBA, which you would think Boston would be, once again, if best-case scenarios play out for the present moment this offseason, when being 2A or 2B with Golden State is still quite, as we saw in the NBA Finals, a distant 2A or 2B?
I'm sorry, I'm not entirely sure what you're asking here.
So I'll put it this way. I'll answer my question, and that is basically I think it would be worth it because then you would be probably just a Kevin Durant or Steph Curry injury away from winning the championship. Now do you sort of get what I'm asking? How valuable would it be for the Celtics to put all the chips into the table this year? They did it in 2008, but there was not that dominant team out there back in 2008. The Spurs were coming off a very flimsy championship in 2007, if you recall. There really was no dominant team in the NBA. Now there's clearly a team that has separated itself from the NBA, separated itself larger. There's almost a bigger discrepancy than I can recall in professional sports with Golden State and than the rest of the NBA. So, I mean, it's kind of really a very open-ended question to say, is that worth it? But yes, Sam, Mr. Vecenie, I am going to ask you, is that worth it? Is that something that you would do?
Again, I think that if they can get both of those guys, it's worth it because I think they would then have, maybe like a 10% chance to win the title, something like that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say it's high, but again, they would be an injury away. They would be, a strong series and a weak series from Golden State away, some sort of weird, pattern of events happening away from a title. And I think that when you can get that close to a title, you should ultimately make that move. If you can't get both of those guys, though, if you can only get one of those guys, I think that they are better off staying the course and becoming the team after the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? Because, this is a team that you can see a situation, and honestly, like, if that ends up being the case and they decide to be the team after the Cleveland Cavaliers, your fan base probably isn't going to like this, but I would very strongly listen to offers for Isaiah Thomas at that stage. And if you can go out and you can continue to accumulate extremely high-level assets for a guy like Isaiah Thomas, because putting a second-team All-NBA player on the market is going to allow you to get those high-level assets. I know that that's not something you want to hear, but Cleveland is a really, really strong force. Golden State is an incredibly strong force in this NBA, and I do at least want to build for 4 years down the road if I can't get close to where I have a 10% chance to win the title.
That is something I would be more than willing to hear. But possibly in January 2018, I do think the Celtics are in a very fortuitous situation. Anyways, real quick, though, because I do want to talk about the draft all in one sort of block, so we can sort of wrap up, really, talking about free agency by talking really briefly about the free agents that are on the Celtics. I think the only way they're going to be able to maintain Kelly Olynyk, if I do recall, is if they don't sign Gordon Hayward. I could be wrong on that. So if there's
correct.
Okay. Yeah. So just real quick then, just the best way to talk about this is, what do you think Kelly Olynyk's going to get in the open market? $10 million a year, right? At least 12?
Yeah, he's kind of a tough guy to gauge. I would imagine there is a team out there that's willing to pay him like, a 440, a 448. Myers Leonard last year got a 440 deal, and Kelly is very clearly, I think, better than Myers Leonard at this stage of his career. That was probably an overpay in terms of what Leonard got, and he was a restricted free agent, so he kind of lasted late into the offseason. I would think that if the Celtics...
Kelly, I think, just to jump on you. I believe Olynyk's restricted. Yeah.
Kelly is a restricted free agent, but if they were to re-sign, or they were to sign Gordon Hayward, the Celtics would then have to rescind his qualifying offer and rescind his rights, and he would move into unrestricted free agency at that stage. So it's a bit of Kelly's in a very complicated situation because of that factor, right? Like, I don't think that he is going to necessarily sign the qualifying offer, because he can very clearly get like a 4-year, $44 million deal. But at the same time, the Celtics do want to keep his rights in case they miss out on free agents. And it puts him in a bit of a holding pattern, a bit of a waiting period, right? I do think that ultimately he is worth keeping if the Celtics miss out on a Gordon Hayward, but at the same time, he's not a guy that you keep to not end up with Gordon Hayward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I will go over on that 10. I think it'll probably be close to 12. I did lie, yeah. Sam, real quick. I just wanted to touch upon this briefly because I know you were pretty high on Jaylen Brown last year when many of us in Boston were not. I think he was 5 on your big board. Is that correct?
Yeah, something in that range. I think like 5. Yeah, okay. Maybe 4 or 5, something like that.
So I don't know how to ask this to you. I guess once another pretty tacky way of me presenting a question for you. Who do you think is sort of it's most important for them to take a leap? Marcus Smart or Jaylen Brown next year?
Well, ultimately, I think that a lot of it depends on what happens with the Celtics this offseason, right? So if they get Gordon Hayward, it's probably a little bit more important for Marcus Smart to take this leap forward. If they get a Blake Griffin, or if they get some elite guard, it probably is more important for Jaylen Brown to take this leap forward, right? Ultimately, the Celtics want both of them to take a leap forward, and given their age and given, development curves around the NBA and positional developmental curves, I think it's very possible that both of those guys will take a step forward next year. Ultimately, in terms of importance, though, it's going to depend on a lot of factors that we just don't have the answer to yet.
It's amazing, too, how we never mentioned Jaylen's name as a possible trade chip, even though he'd be someone who would have tremendous value, although we do sincerely hope that he will be in Boston next year, as he does have a lot of valuable skills, and that's me saying that, as I was as negative as anybody as when the Celtics drafted him. Brief pause in the action to talk about today's sponsor, ZipRecruiter, as we begin our relaunch as CLNS Media this summer and providing leading and online audio-video news, coverage, and analysis across all spectrums of society. We are hiring here at the network, and we are doing so using ZipRecruiter, where we can get all of our candidates in one place and in one click. Try for yourself how awesome this service is for free by going to ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. That's ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. Main event time to officially preview Thursday's NBA Draft. LHR back here with basketball's most accurate draft prospect prognosticator, Mr. Sam Vecenie of the Game Theory Podcast. But before we get into that, Sam, we've had about a day and a half now to digest. Those reports from many credible outlets back on Friday evening, that having the Celts trading down from the top overall slot down to number 3. Stay tuned to CLNS and the Celtics Newsfeed channel. Definitely give Celtics Newsfeed a subscribe right now for up-to-the-date information and immediate analysis if and when anything breaks. But until then, right now on this Sunday morning here on Father's Day, Sam, help us out, bud. What in the hell could Boston possibly be thinking?
I mean, hey, yeah, I would also call this more than a rumor. I mean, whenever Woj is reporting it, Sam Amic's reporting it, Zach Lowe says that, this thing is done. Ramona Shelburne was on TV talking about this being discussed in league circles as a done deal already. I think it's probably pretty fair to say that this thing is, getting to where it needs to be consummated. Nothing is done until it's done, certainly. But, if the Celtics mindset on this is very interesting, because if I was in their shoes, it would take an awful lot for me to trade the number 1 overall pick. And based on some of the reporting yesterday that there's only 1 first-round pick attached additionally, in the pick that was attached does seem to be the Lakers 2018 pick that's unprotected. I don't think that's enough for me to move out of number 1. And I think that that's a really important point to make here. There needs to be a very real offer on the table here with multiple first round picks. Maybe like a Dario Saric, who is on a rookie scale contract, would be very easy to take in and then kind of move around other pieces around him. There needs to be more for me to think that this is a trade worth consummating for the Celtics, and ultimately there probably will be. Let's be clear, Danny Ainge is awesome. I can't remember the last time that Danny Ainge made a trade and it totally backfired, I guess. But This is a complicated negotiation, I think. If I'm Philly, I'm sitting pretty and I'm happy to give up what it takes. But Boston, I think, is in a tougher spot here.
What do you think is the mindset, though? Is it predicated upon trying to shave an extra $1.5 million, $1.7 million, I believe the number was, for the salary cap number, to have that extra money to go after Gordon Hayward or another free agent who we've talked about a lot thus far today? Is it the fact that they are this enamored with Josh Jackson, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I have yet to believe they have not had him in at a workout at all. Just take a wild stab at what you think the mindset could be.
Yeah, it would be saving $1.4 million, $1.38 million in the 120% salary cap hold on the number 1 overall pick to the number 3 overall pick. So that's an ancillary benefit, though. That's not the main reason that you make a deal like this. You make a deal like this because you believe that you are getting more value from, the number 3 pick and whatever the additions are than what Markelle Fultz is going to bring to your organization, right? The Josh Jackson stuff, I don't know how much I buy Josh Jackson. Everyone's kind of jumping with this right now that the Celtics love Josh Jackson. The Celtics love Josh Jackson.
They haven't worked him out. It's amazing.
And the only reason that people are doing that is because of the Chad Ford report on Friday, where he quoted an anonymous GM speculating, saying that Josh Jackson is a Danny Ainge type of player. I can sit here and speculate and tell you that Danny Ainge is Josh Jackson's a Danny Ainge type of player. I don't need to work in a front office to say that. It seems like we're getting ahead of things a little bit in a way. I've talked to people around the NBA that, have given me different answers in terms of, who the Celtics had at number 2 on the board throughout the course of the year, right? So, it's all speculation when it comes from different organizations. Nobody really knows for sure what the Celtics would do at number 3. Ultimately, though, I think that the key is here, though, they do not, or at least, Danny Ainge at the top of this, because I do think that it is ultimately him making this call and not other members of the organization, although I'm sure they're consulted, that Danny Ainge is not necessarily sold on Markelle Fultz being far head and shoulders above other prospects like I do and like, many others around the league do and like many other, analysts do.
Yeah, it's very interesting because Markelle Fultz, from what I've gathered throughout the course of the regular season, the Celtics were pretty much in the pro-Fultz when it was pretty much between Fultz and Ball during, the months of, say, January, February, and March. The Celtics were pretty well to be known as Fultz guys. But I thought it got very interesting throughout the week when not only did Fultz go work out for the Lakers, but there were plenty of, stories that came out there that he did not have the best workout with the Celtics. I just don't know what to make of that. Feel free to talk a little bit about Markelle Fultz, Sam, because me and you have had some discussions off air, and you've said some pretty things that have kind of blown my mind away a little bit when regards to Markelle Fultz. So you may as well just take it, public on these airways right here.
Yeah, no, to me, Markelle Fultz is probably the most complete offensive guard to enter the NBA in, since I've been doing this, certainly.
I was going to say since John Wall.
Yeah, John Wall was a different kind of really good prospect. He wasn't quite as complete, like he didn't have the jump shot, turn the ball over a little bit here and there. Markelle Fultz has a little bit more of a polished skill set, a more complete scorer than John Wall was at that stage. But John Wall is a better athlete, right? And, athleticism at the end of the day often wins out. In terms of completeness, no, that's the kind of player you're talking about, right? Like Markelle Fultz is a true 3-level scorer. He's the first player in nearly 2 decades of college basketball at any level to average 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. The only high major player in the last half century, or the last maybe quarter century to do it. Quarter century to do it, we'll say. 6'5", 6'10" wingspan, prototypical size for the lead guard position. Like I said, 3-level scorer, hit 57% of his shots at the rim, has great body control, great athletic fluidity, a lot of things to like in terms of being able to finish acrobatically. He's probably not as good of a finisher as Kyrie Irving is, but they're similar in terms of the way that they float around the rim and can contort their body to finish in very unique ways. Good vertical explosion, good quickness, good first step, great in the pick and roll. He was in the top 10 in all of college basketball this season in scoring per game in the pick and roll. He does a great job kind of shielding defenders with his body, getting them on his hip, getting them on his back, keeping them there, able to knock down little floaters off of that, do little dump-off passes, dish to teammates for kickouts and stuff. 3-point shot 41.3%, I believe, from 3 this year. Good at shooting off the catch, good at rolling around the screen and pulling up from 3. 70th percentile off the dribble this season, 88th percentile among all college basketball players off the catch. The kind of player that can play both on and off the ball, essentially. I would mention here that I think his most underrated skill is his passing ability. In Pac-12 play this year, Washington and his teammates, not including Fultz's 3-point percentage, which again was above 40, his teammates shot 28.6% from 3 this year. So he averaged over 5 assists a game with basically no space to operate, with defenses collapsing in on him at all times, constantly making him, find these really difficult and unique angles to get out to teammates who may or may not make shots. It's really impressive to me that he was in the top 20 this year in assist rate in college basketball. Good rebounder, does all of this stuff, right? Like it's so easy to see how he translates to the NBA to me. It's just crazy. And
it's really easy to see how he translates to the Boston Celtics. I remember how earlier in our discussion we were talking about how I have not invested any of my bandwidth into how Blake Griffin would fit with the Celtics, largely because I've been so resigned for the longest time that Gordon Hayward is just going to be a Celtic. So I'm like, okay, I just have Gordon Hayward. likewise, it's this here, with this here, with Markelle Fultz, I haven't even almost considered any other player on the Celtics for the last, let's see, when was the lottery was, 3 weeks ago now? I mean, I watched plenty of college basketball throughout the season, largely because of your show. I was talking a lot with Bob Ryan, too. I was watching a lot of games with Bob Ryan as well. I mean, I remember watching a game, it was Kansas against Baylor, and I was enamored as anyone with Josh Jackson, yet I haven't even considered, at any point in time over the last month now of Josh Jackson being a Celtic. So now I kind of need you now to rekindle a little bit and how he would fit in with this team, because they have Jaylen Brown. We've operated under the assumption that they're going to sign Gordon Hayward. Now I guess we can retract on that now a little bit, I guess. But they have Jaylen Brown. I mean, if there's going to be anything they do in the trade market, you'd like to think that would be for another wing, as we've talked a lot about here about Jimmy Butler and Paul George. So I guess you can talk about how Josh Jackson fits on the Celtics now with Jay. I don't know I am completely discombobulated, Sam, of what the Celtics are going to do. So just, I guess, make it simple and just sort of talk to Josh Jackson for me.
Yeah, Josh Jackson is, I don't remember, am I allowed to curse on this show?
You can, I'll beep it out.
Josh Jackson is, the best way to describe him is he's like a motherfucker competitor, right? And I mean that as like a scouting term that people use in scouting circles,
Marcus
right?
Smart.
It is a great thing. He is exactly similar to Marcus Smart in terms of that mentality, right? He wants to tear your heart out on the basketball floor. And in all of these matchups among elite prospects at the high school level, right? All of these times, like at camps and all these times in AAU games and things like that, when Josh Jackson was lined up against these elite other prospects, like a Markelle Fultz, like a Jason Tatum especially, like other guys, he would get the better of them every single time. It would happen without fail. At Kansas this year, we saw a lot of those skills on display, right? He is just an elite level athlete with really good feel for the game in terms of passing the ball, great finisher at the rim, really good ball handler, really good playmaker with the ball in his hands. Jump shot's the key, man. And this seems like a recurring theme with Celtics prospects.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable, huh? Unbelievable.
Well, so I've had this explained to me before, right? Like the way it's been explained to me by other NBA executives is that like early in his career, Danny Ainge struggled with his jump shot, right? And people believe that because Danny got better throughout the course of his career, it's a skill that can improve throughout the course of your career, right?
I've always had that theory too, Sam, and I'm going to jump on you. But this isn't just Marcus Smart or Terry Rozier. This goes all the way back to Rajon Rondo. This goes all the way back to his very first selection that he made. I mean, this is a throwback name for you. Marcus Banks came into the team with the same thing. It is. I think there was a lot of water to that theory.
It's definitely an MO of what Danny Ainge likes to do and how he operates. Having said that, I would not just automatically jump to the conclusion that it's Josh Jackson based on, past behaviors of Danny Ainge, right? Again, though, the question with Josh Jackson, like I said, is the jump shot. Brings the ball too close to his face, has a lot of kind of herky-jerky stuff at the top of his shooting motion, gets off balance quite a bit. When he's in rhythm, though, the shot falls. And he does a decent job of creating rhythm for himself because he's such a read and react player on the basketball floor. Like, everything that's happening around him, he's not one of those players that sees things like 3 steps ahead of the play, right? Although I'm sure there's some of that because he does have a really good basketball IQ. He's more of a guy that, he sees what's happening and reacts quicker to what's happening on the floor than everyone else, right? And that's a really good skill. His anticipation is great. His athletic fluidity is tremendous for his size at 6'8". There's a lot to like about Josh Jackson. Don't get me wrong. I think that he is a potential 2-way all-star in today's NBA. Another concern, though, I will mention is that, he had these 2 off-the-floor incidents this year. That's something that if I was Boston, I would need to meet with him in person about. I know that he hasn't been in yet, but if they are moving down to 3 and they are considering selecting Josh Jackson, the Celtics do as good a job as anybody in the league at gathering background information and making sure that, the guys that they select are going to be fine off the floor and everything. But if I was them, I would need to talk to him face to face. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very. The whole thing is very interesting in that all of a sudden they became these huge Josh Jackson guys, and like I said, that was without a workout. It isn't like he came in, had a one-on-one workout, like when a reference Rajon Rondo when the Celtics were Marcus Williams guys back in the Rajon Rondo draft back in 2006. Rondo comes in and just beats the crap out of him in a workout. It's like, okay, all right, fine. Now you understand why they're so in love with Rajon Rondo. It's just we don't have enough insider information, I guess, to know really, what is going on here to I guess, validate that report that you referenced about Josh Jackson and being with the Celtics as much as it is. And like I said, this is coming from someone who, I remember watching, Kansas play against Baylor with Bob Ryan, and Josh Jackson guarded 5 positions in that game. I remember talking to you about that. He was in the passing lanes all the time. He must have had 7 or 8 deflections. Very impressive player, but right now, like I said, I'm discombobulated in really what's gone on over the past 72 hours with the Celtics. And, not only that, just thinking about how Jackson would fit with the team. This is why I guess I don't go into these fantasy shows or the present moment too often. Is because it is just sort of interesting to think in that, A, they have Jay Crowder and Jaylen Brown. I know the Celtics take the best player available. That generally is their mindset. But they have Jay Crowder and Jaylen Brown. They're likely going to be very aggressive on the free agent market for a swingman in Gordon Hayward. And if they are going to explore the trade market, it's likely going to be for other swing players in Paul George and Jimmy Butler. So that really is just throwing me off. All right. So really to wrap this up too, there's another small storyline. If this trade or any trade like that goes down and the Celtics do move down, Josh Jackson being available at 3 is no guarantee whatsoever. I believe there was a report earlier in the week. I know you can't believe all this stuff, but there was a report way back yonder in the week now that the Lakers had promised Josh Jackson at number 2, so he may not even be available at 3. So I guess, real quick, give me what in the God's name do the Celtics do if they trade down and Josh Jackson is not there for them?
Yeah, I think it'd probably be between Lonzo Ball and Jason Tatum at this stage. I think those are the 4 guys the Celtics really had seemed to hone in on early in the process at the very least. They did have Dennis Smith in for a workout yesterday or today, I believe. So, maybe they're going to reconsider that early on. But I would imagine it would be one of, Jason Tatum or Lonzo Ball would be the selection there. It's a tough call, though. Ultimately, I think Lonzo Ball is going to be the number 2 overall pick. And if Josh Jackson is the guy, then, the Celtics will take him. If they don't think he's the guy, then they won't take him. Everything is so up in the air this time of the year come draft season, right? So much of the time, I think that we're better off just kind of considering common sense, right? And projecting these picks based on a common sense background, because all of these teams are floating reports out there like crazy. They're floating out, the Celtics like Josh Jackson. The Celtics
this was a little
Jason
more of a
Tatum.
floated report, though, because the people that reported said rumors back on Friday night. These weren't just floated reports. A couple tweets out there. Hey, here and this, here and that. There was a lot there, so it was just I don't know.
That the Lakers like Josh Jackson?
No, the actual trade down number 3.
Oh, yeah. No. The trade down of number 3, I think, is a different scenario than, trying to, navigate all of these,
Team X promise we're here. Right, yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah. And, ultimately, I think Lonzo Ball is going to go number 2. And then the Celtics will pick between Josh Jackson and Jason Tatum, whoever they like best, which, according to people around the NBA, seems to be Josh Jackson, but we'll see. Ultimately, though, like I said, I think a common sense approach is a lot better in these situations than, trying to navigate the 75 reports that are floating out there, right? What do the Celtics need? They need, X, Y, and Z. What do the Sixers need? They need a point guard and X. The Lakers need X, Y, and Z, right? Think about that. Obviously, the people running the team in charge know that as well. You're going to have different thought processes from different evaluators, certainly, especially once you get later on in the draft. But at the top of the draft, a common sense approach, I think, is ultimately very important when considering all of the potential factors as well. This
is going to be absolutely crazy for the next 4 days or so. Good luck with you, Mr. Vecenie. I know you are not going to get much sleep, and if I could ever refer anyone to a podcast, I will give it another shout. Please listen to the Game Theory podcast for such information. You will be doing shows, I would say, almost daily now till the draft. Is that correct?
Yeah, something like that. We'll see. We'll see who I can get to guest on and come on the show. But yeah, I would say it's going to be something like daily or 3 times before the draft on Thursday.
At least the Celts are making it interesting for you and for us here at CLNS. But for Sam Vecenie of the Sporting News and Vice, also, yes, host of the Game Theory podcast, definitely follow this basketball savant on Twitter at Sam_Vecenie, Vecenie. Sam, thanks so much for doing this. And thanks to everyone who listens to episode number 214. We will be back next week. But for today's show, music was provided by Chuck Dietz and Steph LeGrateau, graphic designer Scott Dillon, staff writer Eddie Santiago, and CLNS founder Nick Gelso. I am Larry H. Russell, the executive producer and host of Celtics Beat, powered by CLNS Media.